Assalamu alaikum. Dear brothers and sisters, here is the second part of the new video for you. Dan Gibson's Petra thesis provides no answer to these 15 questions. No, it is not a theory. Only a thesis that cannot answer to its antitheses. Question number 7. They are taunting us like naughty boys by saying that Mecca had no vegetation to feed the animals the Quran and Hadith refer to, and therefore, the place of the origin of the Quran and Hadith was not Mecca. But we see 3 truths against this wrong information. 1. The animals the Quran and Hadith refer to are not of any particular place. How can they particularize Mecca or any other place as their place of origin? 2. Mecca was never bare of vegetation. Only the valley of Baqa and the city of Mecca were barren. The greater Mecca, I mean the Mecca province, was never barren. Still grass and trees with grazing animals are available near Mecca as well as throughout the whole province of Mecca. How can anybody deny it? 3. Petra is a barren, rocky place. No trace of any grass or trees can be sighted in or around Petra as far as the eyes can see. How can they fit Petra as the living place of those animals? Are they scatterbrains not to see the realities? Question number 8. The pioneers of Petra thesis foolishly say that the fruits mentioned in the Quran refer to Petra. But it's a total falsehood. No place names are mentioned as related with the fruits that are mentioned in the Quran. How could they relate those fruits with Petra? This is neither a matter of Petra nor of Mecca. Why are they whining for Petra? Again, Tef is prominent for producing fruits and Tef is near Mecca, a district of Mecca. How can they say that these fruits of Tef are not Meccan fruits? In no way. Question number 9. They misinterpret the Quranic verses for Petra against Mecca. The verses number 137-138 of Surah as-Safat are thus misinterpreted. Here are the verses. And lo, ye verily pass by the ruin of them in the morning. And at night time, have ye then no sense? These verses are misinterpreted by the scatterbrains. They argue that these verses prove the nearness of the Prophet's residence to make it possible for him to see the ruined sites of Gomorrah, Sodom, that is, the Dead Sea, in the morning and in the evening, and therefore he must have lived in Petra, not in Mecca. We find their interpretation wrong and nonsensical for the following 3 reasons. Reason 1. Whom the Quran addresses in these verses are ye, so, it is clear that the Quran addresses the general people, not the Prophet. Reason 2. Petra is not so near to Gomorrah and Sodom, that is, the Dead Sea, as the people of Petra could see it every morning and evening. So, the verses do not address the people of Petra. If Petra can be their desired place, why can't it be Jericho, Jerusalem, Hebron, Beersheba, Dilun or Jerash? All these cities are nearer than Petra, and the inhabitants of these cities, rather than the inhabitants of Petra, have more possibilities to see the Dead Sea every day. Why are they running after Petra? How did Petra gratify them? Why are they so biased to Petra? Reason 3. The last clause of the last verse, have ye then no sense, proves that the Prophet and his followers are not addressed in this verse. Allah never considered the believers as devoid of sense. Rather, it is the unbelievers who are referred to in the Quran as lacking sense. So, this verse is not related either with the Prophet nor with his place of living. Question number 10. Dan Gibson says that Abdullah ibn Zubayr transferred the Kaaba from Petra to Mecca. But the question is, how could Dan Gibson know it, and where from has he collected such nonsensical information? His Tabari and Bukhari did never say such wrong things. Then where from has he collected this madness? How could the Zamzam be transferred? Furthermore, Ibn al-Zubayr was killed in the battle with Hajjaj bin Yusuf. How could a dead man transfer the Kaaba? Why did not Hajjaj bin Yusuf corrected it if Zubayr did anything like that? Does Dan Gibson have any answer to these questions? No. Question number 11. Dan Gibson is running after the proofs of the mosques facing towards Petra. He wants to prove that early mosques were Petra facing. But a very recent discovery of Israel shows that the niche of an early mosques at Negev from the 7th or the 8th century faced Mecca. I like to request my viewers to please see the media report, especially CNN of July 20, 2019. How can Dan Gibson prove it otherwise? The Muslims invaded Negev of Israel in 636 AD. So the mosque is likely of the 7th century. How can Dan Gibson deny it? How can he retain his Petra Mosque thesis anymore? And why should he retain it? My dear viewers, the Israeli discovery proves Dan's 3 hypotheses wrong. Number 1. Their hypothesis that the early history Islam before the 9th century is wrong. The existing history of Islam before the 9th century is okay. It is in no way problematic as Dan Gibson and his fans claim. Their claim is rather wrong. Number 2. Their claim that the early mosques of Islam faced towards Petra is also wrong. Mosques always faced towards Mecca, not towards Petra. He is either dodging with the faces of the mosques or there is something wrong with his process of calculation or with mosques themselves. Such faults cannot be the cause of changing the Qibla. Number 3. His claim that Islam has no records before the 9th century is also proved wrong by this discovery. Proofs were always before our eyes and the existing history by both the Muslims and the non-Muslims is still intact. But the stubborn Dan Gibson and his fanatically blind followers heeded not to it. They are so eager to prove Islam as a problematic religion that they forgot even themselves. This discovery of Israel shows them in the clear light as too small to be considered as deciding factor in the history of Islam. Question number 12. Dan Gibson did not show any place of the prophets living in Petra. He failed to do so. On the other hand, we see the ruined structure of the building of Hazrat Khadijah radiallahu anha at Mecca where the Prophet lived after his first marriage. Dan Gibson never showed this structure while talking on the living place of the Prophet and he never even mentioned of the house at Mecca. It proves that he willfully avoided the proof of the Prophet's living in Mecca. It denies his integrity and sincerity in his research. How can he overcome this antithesis against his Petra thesis? Question number 13. Time and again he reiterated that Mecca was not a livable place due to want of water and vegetation and no records about Mecca before the 8th century were found. He wants to say that in 570 AD, the year of the birth of Hazrat Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, no men lived in Mecca. By forwarding this insensible thesis he wants to wipe out the life history of the Prophet and the first 200 years from the history of Islam. The question arises, what happened in the 8th century that made Mecca livable and before that it was unlivable? The want of water and the arid environment were the same before and after the 8th century. No change as yet in the 21st century has taken place when crores of people live there. Then why the 8th century is so important for Dan Gibson? What did happen in the 8th century that made Mecca livable? If the people could live in Mecca in the 8th century, what did prevent them from living there in the 1st century AD or before that, in the pre-Christian era? We have not got any replies to these spontaneous and unavoidable questions from Dan Gibson. We don't understand his riddle when see these trees near the Hajj camps of Mecca. How can we accept him as a man of truth? In no way. Question number 14. We find a fallacy relating to the importance of the 8th century in Dan Gibson's falsifying project. He has composed a new story about the 8th century Caliph Abdul Malik, whom he has made the creator of Allah, Muhammad, Quran, Qibla, Shahada and Islam as a whole. One may succumb, but one must not take Dan Gibson as a fool or stupid. He is rather a careless hypocrite and a modern crusader. He saw the Shahada on Malik's gate, but could not take it as an act of a devout Muslim. He rather took it as the beginning of Islam and precisely concluded that Caliph Abdul Malik was the innovator of Shahada, and therefore, Islam. His blind fans took his conjecture as a discovery, but the question jumps up, why Abdul Malik was called Caliph? Whom did he succeed in caliphate if there were no past caliphs? Who were the people that made him caliph if there were no Muslims before him? Caliph does not mean a king, it only refers to a viceroy of somebody else. Then whose viceroy was he if there was no prophet before him? Who was the prophet whose name he wrote in the Shahada? Can Dan Gibson and his supporters reply to these questions? They cannot. Then what is the value of their lectures and comments? Nothing. It is only nonsense they are vomiting. Question number 15. Dan Gibson claims that he researched on Mecca and found no trace of anything older than 8th century. But the question arises, where and when did he do such research? He did not enter the Haram Sharif of the Kaaba, he never stepped into the Mecca Museum where some relics of a time earlier than the 6th century are preserved. He never excavated any spot of Mecca. How could he determine the age of Mecca city? He denied the old maps of Arabia and created some new ones himself wherein he showed many unreal things. He wiped out Mecca from his map and willfully showed Mecca beyond the caravan route. He did not say anything about Mecca, the Greek name of Mecca used by Ptolemy, until he was challenged by the Muslims. How can anybody consider him as a faithful researcher? In no way.